Well, it was a bombshell, yet another ethics bombshell exploding in Justin Trudeau's office. But he just has that perma grin. He's going to try and brazen it out. Mario Dion, the second Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner, has convicted Trudeau of violating the Conflict of Interest Act. That in itself is not a criminal code offense, but it is a law. He broke the law yet again. I have shared with you my initial thoughts on the subject in a monologue, but someone who I follow very closely, especially when it comes to matters involving both law and politics, is our friend Manny Montenegrino, who was our chief expert on the NAFTA renegotiations, and he has been following this ethics report very carefully, and he joins us now via Skype from Ottawa. Manny, great to see you again.
Great to be with you, Ezra, as always.
Well, Manny, I had my say on the subject. If I had to sum up my biggest concern in one sentence, it would be this. 9 people who work for the Prime Minister told Mario Dion that they had more relevant information to share, but that Trudeau was forbidding them from disclosing it. So that tells me we don't even know the worst of it. That's, I guess, my takeaway, but I really want you to go deep on this. Can you take us through the offenses, take us through what Trudeau did, and use your own legal and political mind to help guide us here?
Absolutely, Ezra. Let's start from the beginning. Justin Trudeau was elected late 2015. By 2016 March, he's already orchestrated, which is very hard to do, a free trip to the private island of the Aga Khan. Now, he did not go, but his wife and friends did, and he obviously, that was one of the violations under the Ethics Act under Section 11 by taking gifts. Then another similar violation when he and his family went back on December 16th to the Aga Khan's private island, and people have estimated that each one of these trips, if you include the entourage and being at the island, and sometimes, as the Prime Minister's wife was, being on the island by yourself without the Aga Khan there, it's about $200,000 per trip.
Yeah.
So we're talking about $400,000 worth of free gifts. Now, that was 2 violations that the previous ethics commissioner found. But in addition, another alarming one, and we know this, and I think Canadians know this, this Prime Minister does not have his hands on the minutiae of the running of the government. But he did with respect to putting himself in a position where they were giving grants to the Aga Khan, and he again was found to be in breach of the ethics, Section 21, which is he failed to recuse himself. Now think about that. You've just got $200,000 twice, free trips to Aga Khan, and you make yourself to the decision of giving grants to the Aga Khan Foundation, and that is a violation. So all in all, at the very first instance of these 2 trips and others, he's in breach of 13 separate violations under the Ethics Act, the Conflicts Act. And that was found by a ethics commissioner. And I want to remind you, Ezra, when we were going through the second trouble with Prime Minister Trudeau, the obstruction of justice, he calmed the nation by saying, we don't need a justice inquiry. We don't need a royal commission. We have a quasi-judge, the ethics commissioner, and he called him a judge. And I paid note to that, Ezra, because he's trying to comfort everybody that a judge is going to be looking at it. Mario Dumont is a judge. He will be adjudicating. And that's what he said to Canadians. So we'll get to that in a second. But the very first instance where he has 13 breaches of separate violations under the Ethics Act, there's another important point that the previous Commissioner Dawson found, and that was the Prime Minister was not credible. And what I mean by that, he attempted to say to a judge that the Aga Khan was a friend who he had not seen for 30 years. The Commissioner said, I do not accept your evidence. And when a judge says that, we say, we can use different language, but basically some say lie, but others might say not credible and not a credible witness. So in the backdrop, you have the Prime Minister of Canada, who has been found 13 separate violations over 2 attempts, March 16th, December 16th, and found by a judge not to be credible. Now we sit And what does he do? Does he behave? No, he then goes and tries a 4-month campaign to obstruct justice for SNC-Lavalin. Now, what happened, Ezra? What happened? This is unprecedented. The Attorney General of Canada, top lawyer, breaks and says, I can't take this anymore. This is wrong. This has got to stop. And that in itself ought to have, that is about as serious as you can get in Canada when the top, and this is a Liberal Attorney General. This isn't politics, but it was seen as politics because that's how the Prime Minister got around it. But the Attorney General says, this is so bad that I need to speak. And then in addition to that, she gets fired. She was fearful of losing her job because she was holding up the rule of law. The clerk quits. Butts quits. 5 attorney generals sent a letter saying to the RCMP, we see evidence of obstruction of justice. The opposition leader, Andrew Scheer, says, we see evidence of obstruction of justice. And gratuitously, the Attorney General of Ontario, the ex-Attorney General Michael Bryan, says in his legal opinion, it is obstruction of justice. Well, that was all pushed aside, Ezra, because it said, well, this is all politics. We got to wait for Mario Dumont, the judge, as the Prime Minister likes to call him. Well, they have to wait till what he says. Well, what did he say? Yeah. He said, in a scathing decision, it was clear conflict of interest, and the evidence was there that there was clear obstruction of justice. So it is. He is not a politician. He's appointed by the Prime Minister. So here you have a Attorney General appointed by the Prime Minister, clerk working for the Prime Minister, Butts, best friend of the Prime Minister, an Attorney General from Ontario, and now a judge of the Ethics Commissioner appointed by Trudeau, all pointing to clear evidence that there is obstruction of justice.
You know, I read the Mario Dion's report, and he's a very clear writer, and I would invite people to find the report and read it online. It's not too technical a document. You'll get into lots of the details of who said what when, but it shows that Trudeau had this whole team working against Jody Wilson-Raybould. They were scheming privately with lawyers from SNC-Lavalin, right, and not telling Jody Wilson-Raybould that. And Wilson-Raybould said she was surprised to learn this, that, for example, that they were taking legal opinions drafted by SNC-Lavalin. The Prime Minister Trudeau was briefing themselves on those, and they were lobbying Jody Wilson-Raybould, pressuring Jody Wilson-Raybould on behalf of the company. It's crazy, Manny, and that only came out.
Yeah, exactly. And it can't, Ezra, I cannot think of a case where the facts are so clear and meets the test under Section 139(1) of the Criminal Code, which is obstruction of justice. It is a very clear section. It says everyone. That includes Justin Trudeau, who willfully, and that Mario Dion's decision was absolutely willful. When you have an orchestrated attempt for 4 months, working along with SNC-Lavalin lawyers and trying to obstruct the Attorney General, that is about as willful. I go past willful and say it's premeditated, but he met the threshold of willful, or the case was. Yeah. Attempts, and it was clearly many attempts over a 4-month period, in any manner, it says. And it is to obstruct. So the case has been absolutely met. Yeah. And so it is. Now, Ezra, here's an interesting point. And, we get more American news than we get Canadian news, thanks to our media who's fixated on Trump. So we don't, but everyone knows the Mueller report, the investigation there was to see whether there was any collusion. Now, this is very typical in criminal cases. There is an alleged crime, you investigate it. And within that alleged crime, sometimes those who are investigated don't cooperate fully with the investigator. Right. And so in the Mueller case, they came forward and said there's no evidence of Russian collusion, but did the president, with his tweets and otherwise, try to obstruct, and they found, of course, not a clear case. Now, bring ourselves to Canada. We have a criminal case of obstruction of justice where the Attorney General clearly made the case, and now the judge, ethics commissioner, Mario Dumont, finds clearly that. But he also says something else, Ezra, and you alluded it at the beginning of the show, and that is they obstructed justice within the investigation of obstruction of justice by not letting the 9 people speak. Now, in America, the White House let everyone speak. In Canada, 9 key witnesses were told not to speak. That is a separate charge of obstruction of justice. And so you have, the irony is that we have an abundance, we have a plethora, we have a mountain of obstruction of justice cases here. This isn't just simply saying, oh, we can't meet with you, Marion. We're instructed not to meet with you. It's pretty
the way
severe.
Dion described it, these witnesses had information, were prepared to cooperate, but they were ordered not to by a government lawyer. And there's this crazy line in there, Manny, where Mario Dion says that when he tried to negotiate the release of this information, they were stonewalled, and Trudeau said, well, what can I do? The PCO lawyer says not to, so I'm not, like, as if the Prime Minister doesn't have the power to release that information just because some lawyer who works for Trudeau says don't do it, and Trudeau says, what can I do? The lawyer says I can't give you the info. Stephen Harper waived privilege over everything in the case of Admiral Mark Norman. He just said, I waive it. Any rights I have, I waive it. And Trudeau not only didn't waive it, he enforced his rights, and the little coward blamed some lawyer in the Privy Council office. Well, I can't believe he's getting away with this, Manny.
It's shocking, Ezra. There was a case where the RCMP investigated a senator for spending $90,000, Senator Duffy, on specious evidence, on allegations. We have here clear, not only allegations, we have here judgments of a judge, ethics commissioner that lays out obstruction. And in that case, on the Senator Duffy, what did Prime Minister Harper do? He not only instructed everyone to be cooperative and give all the evidence, most of them were witnesses for the Crown. They weren't obstructing. They were, in fact, witnesses for the Crown to assist the Crown in the case. Here we have obstruction by the Prime Minister's office on a case of obstruction. It is beyond comprehension. And now, Ezra, Canadians know, and I've been asked this on Twitter because I've got a lot of American followers, is there any impeachment capability in Canada? And Americans don't know. They have a solid constitution where everyone is responsible and there's supervision and so on. In Canada, all we have is a parliamentary democracy that solely relies on ministerial responsibility, i.e. kind of an honest check of yourself. If you do something wrong, you resign. And without that, we have no power. We have to depend on the integrity of our politicians to act properly, or the parliamentary system is a joke. And since it was starting to get a joke, we created a legislation called the Conflicts of Interest Act because we didn't need that before because we trusted our politicians. They were honorable, they were representing, and they were. But now we have a piece of legislation, and that doesn't even help to get responsible government. We need to have, unfortunately, the only thing that will work is a criminal investigation by I cannot believe that the RCMP is not already and has not already concluded. There is absolutely no evidence, none, zero, that suggests that at least investigation and charges should not be laid. Now, where this goes criminally is up to great lawyers and great parsing of the criminal code. But Ezra, we have a decision of a quasi-judicial body, the ethics commissioner, referred to by the Prime Minister as a judge, scathingly say there was obstruction of justice. That's all you need to lay charges.
And he's explicit that he doesn't even know the whole story because of the 9 witnesses who were ordered to stay quiet. It's very frustrating. I was talking to Lauren Gunter about this the other day, and I said our system depends on people voluntarily complying with the law, even if they're not thrilled about it. I mean, I guess all of society depends on that. We don't have enough policemen to ensure that every single citizen obeys the law all the time. There's just not enough. There's not enough jails. We have to rely on people doing the right thing. In politics, I think it's sort of the same way. After what Mario Dion just reported, if the entire political establishment says we're going to brazen it out, we're going to say, well, we disagree and move on, and like nothing happened, something's got to break because we rely on some submission by the Prime Minister to the rule of law, but he's sort of saying to all of Canada, I dare you. I dare you, you're going to blink first. Let's have a staring contest. I'm not going to blink.
Well, Ezra, it's a bit different than that. There's a lot, and it's just so infuriating in the media. The discussion now is, will Trudeau apologize? Why did he not apologize? No one cares. And all this does is diminish the seriousness. Your kid broke a window, should he apologize, should not? The seriousness of the crime. This is obstruction of justice. You can't get much bigger, especially when it's wielded by the Prime Minister and the PMO. Mm-hmm. But Canadians do not understand. Prime Minister Trudeau is not being obstinate or being, narcissist about not apologizing. He's got great criminal lawyers telling him, do not apologize, because the case is so strong against you. Right. Mario Dion made such a strong case. If you apologize, you are basically saying to the court, when you get to a criminal court, I am guilty. He has to. Listen, if I was instructed, some great criminal lawyer friends of mine that would simply say, do not admit, do not apologize.
Because it still could go to court. Here's the thing. The new RCMP commissioner was appointed by Trudeau. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that she's not putting integrity first, but I saw this little video clip of her hugging Trudeau in that close huggy way that Trudeau does with women, that he wants to sort of mark, I'm the alpha dog, you are submissive to me. He does this to all the women in his cabinet. He touches the bum of the Governor General. Like, he's got this weird thing he does with women. He physically touches them, he hugs them. I think it's sort of like a pickup artist domination psychological trick. I'm worried, Manny, that RCMP commissioner is not doing the right thing, and I hope I'm wrong, but she reminds me too much of the submissive women who stayed in Trudeau's cabinet, as opposed to the proud, honorable women, Jody Wilson Raybould and James Philpott, who quit cabinet. I'm worried that she's more in the mold of Melanie Joly and Catherine McKenna, women who would do anything just to stay in power.
Well, Ezra, I don't want to say that, but I will say this. You have an unprecedented set of facts that began at the beginning of the year. The Attorney General pleading to the public that I think he's going to fire me because I'm protecting Canada's rule of law. Then she gets fired. The clerk quits. Butts quits. Attorney generals are demanding an RCMP investigation. Yeah. This all happened. Now, the video you were referring to happened on July 1st. And that was Canada Day. And I see that video on Twitter, and it breaks my heart to see people use that. And I've retweeted it because I want people to see it. That basically are saying, now, the RCMP commissioner knows very, very well that there's at least an apprehension that there could be some criminality, a very serious one. You would think you'd have the presence of mind not to be in that hug fest during this. And now we have a judge, Mario Dumont, coming with a decision saying obstruction of justice, and only a month or so ago you have the RCMP commissioner hugging the accused prime minister, and it's just unfortunate. And the RCMP, they're the last people in Canada that can protect Canadians what we expect, the rule of law. We lost our Attorney General, who is protecting the rule of law. We have a new Attorney General, and it is beyond my comprehension that David Lametti, who has said, I don't need to interview, who has now before him, and everybody was waiting for Mario Dumont, who now has before him a decision by a judge, as Trudeau calls him, the ethics commissioner, and the Attorney General of Canada is not calling in the RCMP. The Attorney General of Canada is not saying, this is serious. The Attorney General of Canada says, I still take the Prime Minister's word. I mean, the only person that can protect Canadians, the only group that can protect Canadians, and it is wrong to put this to an election. This is not a matter of an election. This is a matter of rule of law, and this is the only people that can do it, Ezra, are the RCMP, and they've got to move quickly because we are slowly losing confidence in our judiciary. We've also even, we even heard in that report, which breaks my heart, that the ex-Chief Justice, Supreme Court Justice Beverly McLaughlin, was helping in this obscure obstruction of justice. I mean, it is beyond my comprehension that we've lost the judiciary, the sense of, we've lost the clerk of the Privy Council, the one who takes care of the independent bureaucracy. We've lost, and please, God, let's not us lose the RCMP. We've seen the obstruction of justice with the Admiral Norman. Our military is now corrupted. I mean, this is, and Ezra, what bothers me, and I say this to almost on every time we do an interview, I think of those two young men in China. They are sitting there, and China is now reading a legal judgment saying that the Prime Minister obstructed justice while China was told that we in Canada never interfere in the justice process. That decision vindicates China, their gross and vile acts to these two wonderful men. But they sit there now saying, we were right. Trudeau obstructed. Trudeau told us he doesn't. He did. A judge said that he obstructed. And we hold these Canadians in the same honor or the same perspective as they hold our citizen from the CEO of Huawei. And so they sit there and say, we're doing the same as you are because we have a legal judgment. And that alone, I mean, God, do Canadians care? There are two men that are now in jail, and the Prime Minister should resign. The RCMP should investigate. These men are in jail because of the Prime Minister acts making it worse and worse and worse for them. And I can't believe people are not as upset. I mean, these could be my sons. These could be my nephews. And these men did absolutely nothing except get caught in the obstruction of justice by the Prime Minister.
Well, Manny, it's incredible. I know we are only, about 75 days away until the next election, and I am worried he's just going to bluff and brazen his way out. I truly believe that if the RCMP does not investigate Trudeau, I think he's going to get away with it. Yeah, you've got a few journalists who are upset about it. Andrew Coyne and Paul Wells has obviously fallen out of love with Trudeau in recent months. But other than a handful like that, I see the Toronto Star editorial board has already forgiven Trudeau. By the way, they're taking $115,000 a week from Trudeau's bailout fund. I'm worried he's going to get away with this, and I'm worried not just because I don't like him as a Prime Minister, but because of the legacy of corruption in our rule of law. Last word to you, Manny. It's great to have you on the show again.
Yeah, thank you, Ezra. Listen, Ezra, I understand Canadians to be kind, to be generous, to be forgiving. We are wonderful people in that sense. But here we have a person that has had 13 priors, 13 breaches of separate sections of the Conflict of Interest Act reported by a judge. And now we have him in the height of conflict of interest, in the height of criminal activity, which is obstruction of justice 139(1). And it is clear that the case has been made. And within the investigation, he obstructs the investigator. I mean, it can't get worse. There is got to be a time in Canadian soul that they got to say, we've got to respect the rule of law. We got to put Canada ahead. If this continues, Ezra, if this doesn't end, there's nothing that the Prime Minister cannot do in a new mandate, and it scares me.
Yeah, that's
and Ezra, we're watching. It's amazing. I don't understand. We're watching what's happening in China. In China, in Hong Kong, there was no obstruction of justice. There's no malfeasance. It was just a piece of legislation that was going to kind of remove some of the human rights of the Hong Kong citizen. And millions are on the street. They understand what it is to lose your civil rights. In Canada, we are not only not caring as much, but we're allowing the malfeasor to continue. And we're basically, I almost feel like we are lobsters or frogs in a hot water. We just turn up the temperature and we'll slowly die and nobody cares. Yeah, and there goes the...
I wish we had the same love for freedom that those Hong Kongese are showing. Man, it's great to see you again. Thanks for taking the time. You are our go-to expert for these matters, and it's great to talk to you again.
No problem, Ezra. Thank you.
Right on. There's Manny Montenegrino. He's the head of Think Sharp and a former lawyer to Prime Minister Stephen Harper. That's an excerpt from the Ezra Levant show. Every day, I do a video monologue, and then I interview an interesting guest. And then I end by reading my hate mail, but you've got to subscribe to it, which you can do at therebel.media/shows.